So everyone, I wanted to thank you for taking the time out and thank you for registering for the webinar. My name is Frank Sullivan. I'm the marketing director at LSDM, London School of Design and Marketing. I recognize some of your names. Some of you are our postgraduate students, and some of you are new and joining in. With me today, we have George Dziedzic, who is the CEO of aiAcquire, an experienced entrepreneur who is going to be sharing some of the insights with us today on growing a digital business. George sold his former company back in 2017 and has had more than 30 years experience in building technology businesses from the ground up. George, welcome.
Hi everybody.
It would be great to get
to be here.
Good little introduction from yourself.
Yeah. So I'm actually, years ago, I was planning to retire, but my customers kept coming back to me and asking for some help. So, and then I was getting a little bit bored as well. So I've actually got involved in two companies. So aiAcquire, which is a distributor for a company that does marketing automation tools in a SaaS model. So just getting that one off the ground. And the other one is a company called Bermisco that pretty much did what my former company did. And so helping companies with their distribution channels and running those efficiently.
Thank you very much, George. And we have Frank Bennett, who's joining us also in the UK. Frank is the co-CEO of DigiBoard and also has fantastic experience in the technology sector. Frank, welcome. And can we have a little bit of background to your story, please?
My story? Well, 40 years industry veteran, semi-retired now. My recent experience in the IT industry has been with cloud computing, serving on some industry boards, written books for Microsoft and Google. One of my co-authored books is currently in Microsoft.com. Relevant to this conversation, I think, also free to download from Microsoft.com, and it's thinking of building a digital operating model. So if you're building a digital business, underneath that, you're going to have some sort of digital operating model. And this book is written, okay, it's Microsoft-centric, but many of the things are translatable to other technology platforms as well. More recently, though, and one of the reasons why I'm interested in joining this particular meeting is to share my experience as someone who's been building a digital business over the last 4 years. That's a born in the cloud digital business. Our business is a challenger, disruptor business. We are challenging the convention of how governance reviews are delivered to organizations. Our current focus is on charity and not-for-profit organizations, housing associations. And because we're delivering it digitally, we can transform a number of things, the time and involvement of those participants to the governance review, but also break down the cost dramatically by removing many of the labor-intensive tasks. So we're 4+ years now into this. We've just turned a profit, and we're expanding our product line to go into other adjacent sectors in education and sports. So yeah, I'll share with you what scars you get when you build a digital business.
That's great. Well, George and Frank, welcome. My first question is going to be around the topic of growing a digital business. So that's the title of today's webinar and today's masterclass. And building on the experience that the three of us have in building digital businesses, I think it's first most important to define what is a digital business and what is digital literacy. Frank, you had a very good definition when we spoke earlier. What is digital literacy?
Okay, so I went for an authoritative source on this. So the UK has a charter, if you will, to be one of the leading digital countries in the world. That underpins its economic development and economic competitiveness in the world. So the Office of National Statistics that measures digital literacy does it by looking at the number of adults that are internet users or non-internet users. That's the first metric they use. And over time, the number of non-internet users has been declining, which therefore says that the number of internet users has been increasing. There are still many millions of people who yet to have access to the internet, and I don't know what the demographic of those are, whether that's by geography or age. But let's turn specifically to how digital literacy is measured. there's 5 characteristics which indicate digital literacy among a person. So first of all, communicating. So that's easy, isn't it? I mean, we're communicating now using digital tools. Handling information and content. Well, anyone who's conducted a search on Google or other search engine will understand what I'm talking about. Transacting in the same way, if you've been on eBay, Facebook, Marketplace, Amazon, you know what I'm talking about, transacting. The next one's a little interesting to me, and that is problem solving. We'll define that. Maybe I'm going to talk about that in a minute, problem solving. And the last one actually is very important, I think. Being safe and legal online. I wonder how many among the audience have unfortunately had the honey trap of a ransomware attack. Not me, fortunately. But those are the 5 characteristics of judging digital literacy among a person and a population.
And I think if you think about digital literacy, that's really the foundational level for what you need to succeed. You can't grow a business if you don't have a team that is digitally literate. And I think we were talking about 3 different levels of understanding. There's the foundational level of digital literacy, which is turning on your computer, using a browser, using basic office tools. Intermediate levels of digital literacy, which is understanding data concepts. It's being able to do simple things on Excel. It's being able to manipulate data. And then there's mastery of the subject, or an advanced level of digital literacy, which goes towards creating systems, information architecture, understanding the role of data. And that brings me on to my next question. George, how important do you think data literacy is and digital literacy is, depending on your function? Right now, we're with marketing and design folk, right? That's our community. But if you think about the CTO needing to be an expert in digital literacy, it's got to be 10 out of 10, right? But what about other functions? What about other people in the business?
I think everybody in the organization needs to have some level of digital literacy. And I think at the top of the organization, the digital literacy on a score of 1 to 5, it needs to be 3 to 4. It needs to be fairly high. Further down in the organization, where people are dealing with the nuts and bolts, it needs to be up at the 4 to 5 level. But what I'm saying is that everybody needs to be digitally literate so they can communicate with each other.
So digital literacy has these 5 characteristics, right? Which one do you think is the most important?
To me, it's communication.
Okay.
And it's communication internally. So, for example, right now in my new company, we are using tools like Slack to try and get away from communicating via email and saving documents all over the place, but making it easy for everybody to communicate internally, share ideas, develop on ideas, and then externally, you can't get away from it. You do need to use email, but you need to make sure that you have tools which are well integrated, because you can spend an awful lot of time chasing around trying to find information, where actually what you want to be doing is running the business and being creative.
A question to both of you that I'd like to understand. I think we need to be honest with ourselves. I mean, can you succeed in business these days? Can you do anything, let alone grow a business, without digital literacy? Frank?
I think it's becoming an increasingly essential skill. Can you grow a business? Well, yeah, the answer is yes, you could, but I think it would be made much simpler in some ways, but also your chance of success, more importantly, would be enhanced by being able to use your digital skills to grow your business. And I'm sure we'll get under the fundamentals of some of the things that you need to do to grow your business, and we'll talk about those things. But in a nutshell, in answer to your question, I think you would be substantially disadvantaged in today's world if you did not have good digital skills, good digital literacy among your workforce.
George?
Absolutely. Look at the tradespeople that, come to my house from time to time, plumbers, carpenters, builders. They are all digitally enabled. It's just astonishing how well organized they are, because they don't want to be wasting time on issuing invoices and that kind of thing. That's they want that automated. So they value the tools that are out there to be able to run their businesses and do more business.
So we live in a digital world. Digital transformation is all around us. It's been happening at a much accelerated rate as a result of the pandemic. I mean, look at us. We're a digital school, and we've done nothing but grow for the last year and a half to 2 years. Our numbers have gone up substantially because people are looking for better e-learning experience. But it's the same thing in many other industries. We talked about the importance and the role of digital literacy, and a key component of that is understanding data. I think data is what is driving a lot of business decision making, and you can make good or bad decisions, but you can also have inaccurate data or data that you don't trust. Everything that we do is becoming data driven. Everyone in the audience will have heard at least once that term being data driven at some point in the last 5 years in their career. So, question to both of you. George first, how would you describe the state of data in most organizations?
A swamp. A swamp. And you can't work in a swamp. You've got to clean up your data's got to be reliable. It's got to be accurate. It's got to be up to date, and fit for purpose. So yeah, that is absolutely essential, because if you're going to be making decisions for your business based and for your customers based on data, it's got to be reliable. You've got to be able to trust it. There are different levels of which you can use the data. So for example, data, in some cases, data doesn't need to be 80% right. You can still get some decent results. But when you then start to go into more detail, your data needs to get more and more accurate and more reliable as you start to drill down and make more detailed decisions.
I think the availability of data, accurate data, what exists now versus what existed 5 or 10 years ago, is underpinning your business growth. So can you explain to me a little bit more about what aiAcquire does and how you're using data to grow your business?
So the way we're using it is to get extremely highly targeted in terms of the customers or the people and organizations we approach.
Hyper-targeting.
Yeah. So the more we can find out about the right type of individual, the persona, the better. Because then we waste less time in a sort of a scattergun. We avoid a scattergun approach at all costs. It gets you into all sorts of difficulties. So we want the message that we have, the services that we have, to be extremely relevant and make sense for the individuals that we're targeting.
But it sounds like your methodology has two parts. There's the internal and the external half. The internal half is creating your ideal customer profile. It's interviewing customers. It's really understanding who's right for my solution, not one size fits all. You're getting really targeted about the types of sizes of business, the types of buyer personas, the influencers and the decision makers, and working on key messages. And you're doing all of that internal work, that research work, which is qualitative. And then from an external perspective, you're looking at using data, publicly available data, or sales intelligence tools to help understand your total addressable market, which is X number of customers, say 1 million users, then narrowing it down to who fits into my sweet spot, my service obtainable market. So from the total addressable market, who's my service obtainable market, or service addressable market rather. And from within that, using hyper targeting tools like, we'll talk about some of the software systems later, in order to be able to target those messages at the right time to the right person using accurate data. So I think that's a really good methodology for growing a business. People should be able to learn from that.
And, you know, one of the things we do is we rank and score various attributes that in our targeting. So, and we use a traffic light system of green, orange, and red. So the green ones are absolutely the most important for us to focus on. So, like you say, out of the 100,000, you get it down to, you know, 10,000, down to just a few hundred that you absolutely want to have as your customers, and you move heaven and earth to try and get to those people and have conversations with them.
Well, if that kind of data is available for a sales intelligence company, imagine what politicians could do with it. Frank, my next question to you.
Well, Frank, can I just pick up on something?
Yes, please.
George used the word swamp, and of course, swamps are dangerous places to be in, particularly if you don't know what's under the water. But one of the things, because we are talking about digital skills, building and growing a digital business, we're talking about data literacy, how we put data to work in our organizations, and particularly the role of data in supporting our sales and marketing activities, which is what George has just been talking about. The new, if we go back to the swamp analogy, the new snake in the swamp is growing regulation around the world for data protection and data privacy. And every marketing professional, every sales professional for that matter, but more I would suggest marketing professional, because they're more outbound in their communications, in a broadcast mass communication way than an individual salesperson, needs to be aware and understand most organizations now have an onerous responsibility to data protection and data privacy in their communication. And communication was something that George talked about as one of the top skills, data literacy skills that organizations must possess. So I'm throwing that in the swamp for discussion.
Thank you. And Frank, that brings me beautifully onto my next point, which is for you. We've talked about the role of data and the role of data literacy, but we haven't really talked about decision-making and goal setting, which again is a key component of growing a digital business. So I want to talk to you about the role of data within KPIs and setting KPIs, or for our students, key performance indicators, and how you're setting goals, and then how you're measuring the data to prove whether or not you're working towards those goals.
Yeah, so KPIs and scorecards have been very popular tools, and they exist at many levels in the organization, even at the board level, by the way. The thing that is necessary to go, are we achieving our KPIs? Where are we on the scorecard? And the scorecard may use a red, amber, green system to evidence or show progress. But I use the word evidence there. What I see creeping into business more and more is measurement, yes, but also evidence alongside measurement as well. Organizations are being held more and more accountable. They're having to be more and more open and transparent. That just doesn't apply to government, by the way. It applies to lots of organizations. The legislative framework and regulatory framework that organizations are working under today require them to have a lot of data and present that data in a way that is supportive of their reputation as a business and the way in which they operate within the social fabric of the country that they exist in, or if they're a multinational company, across multiple countries. So I see KPIs and scorecards a necessity in business just to make sure we're heading in the right direction, we're achieving the things that we need to achieve to remain profitable, sustainable as a business. But I also see a growing need to put some evidence behind that as well. Evidence that is used both internally as a justification for the things we're doing, but evidence also to use externally for the publication of the organization and how it is existing, you know, in the social fabric that it functions.
So dumb that down for me a little bit. When we're talking about setting KPIs and we're using the data that exists within our organization, we are measuring things inaccurately, or we're not measuring things enough?
I'll tell you the big challenge, Frank, that I hear from those clients that I talk to. You think about the number of functions or departments in an organization, all of them have their own individual reporting requirements. Yes, HR would have different reporting requirements to finance, to production, and so on and so on. What organizations are struggling with is the legacy of this siloed reporting around KPIs and scorecards. And what they want to build is one system that can then be used to, one system supported by one data set that can be sliced and diced to meet the individual reporting requirements of different functions and departments in the organization. Yep. This is a huge challenge because George said most organizations, the data is in a swamp. It's also siloed. It's also, a lot of it is historic and redundant and duplicated. I think in the effort to get to a position where organizations understand the value of KPIs and scorecards and rely upon them accurately, they have to build better systems to support that, because the overhead of the way in which they've done it in the past is too costly. And that's a message I'm hearing quite clearly from my customers.
So I think
the other thing with the KPIs is what you really want to know is let's say you run a marketing campaign and you want to know whether it was successful or not. So it's important to have some sort of closed loop system which gives you feedback on, if it worked well, understand why it worked well and should it be repeated. And equally, if it didn't work, why didn't it work? Can we learn something from that? Do we need to adjust it? So a bit of advice there is, don't try and overanalyze some of these KPIs. Go and try things out. If they're 80% right, give them a try, because you need that feedback from the marketplace to see whether it's working or not. You try and get it right first time, but the reality is you probably never will.
You know what, George, and I'm sure you've heard this as well. Sometimes people in organizations that are subject to KPIs and scorecards and endless reporting that goes on in organizations today, because it's just the way things are, I'm afraid, they report how much of a distraction it can sometimes be from getting on with the real job.
Yes, and and a lot of times what we see, we were just doing a proof of concept for a company where they get their data coming in, sales data, point of sales data coming in from distributors, from partners, from customers, and everybody's reporting it in all sorts of different ways. And it becomes impossible to get it into that one form where you can then put it straight into your business intelligence tool. So that you can then look at, create some dashboards to see what really is going on. And people are spending inordinate amounts of time trying to massage that data into some form where it's usable.
Can you get too bogged down in the detail of data and the detail of all of these digital systems? For example, on any given week, my team will use over 50 different bits of software, SaaS software, and these are tools that help us do our job. George, you mentioned Slack earlier, but we've got, it's really hard to focus on, say, selling, winning, delivering campaigns if you don't have the tools or if you don't have the digital literacy, then don't bother. You simply won't be able to access that world and you'll be left behind. But when you do have these tools, you need an approach, you need a methodology for using these things effectively, because at the end of the day, data, it comes from the measurement of an activity, or it comes from being able to track things in order to show correlation or causation or trends. These are simply things that we measure, right? So we've talked about the importance of setting KPIs and setting growth targets and having the systems and tools in place. But what happens when that all gets a bit too much, right? Tools give us leverage. Data is the input, and tools give us leverage to increase our output as design and marketing professionals. A great example of this would be, Frank, was it you that gave the example earlier this afternoon that, you know, programmatic ad buying and PPC management was the gold standard 5 years ago.
Yep.
Right? If you could do that, you were golden. Now they're a dime a dozen. They're everywhere. So these tools that give us leverage can create incredible results that compound. But because of the exponential effect, because of this snowballing effect of the leverage that tools give us in marketing and sales, they can also create negative outcomes as well. A couple of examples to discuss amongst ourselves, right? I've got 3 case studies to discuss. The first case study is where a bank had a flash crash, right? They have incredibly sophisticated systems, risk models. They had extremely good controls, and it's a heavily regulated environment. Yet somehow, because of these high-speed, high-frequency trading systems, the volume of trades that went through magnified the loss. And there was a flash crash, and this market completely collapsed in the space of minutes. What would have taken days collapsed in minutes because they thought everything could be automated. And all of these systems, all of these tools were so well integrated and so well connected that by the time a human had figured it out, the mess was already there. Similarly, in the way that a bank can give a mortgage or lend you money, you have leverage to invest in other things. Just because a bank will give you $1 million to borrow doesn't mean it's a sensible deal, right? So how we leverage our efforts to grow a company may produce negative results, but they're not linear. The relationship between input and output is not linear. You can really cock things up as well as you can magnify the success. George, you had a really good example of where things have gone wrong in your previous company. I want to talk about what's gone wrong with the data and what's gone wrong with the growth strategies, and then talk about what's gone right. What are we going to do better the next time around?
Well, you know, way back, there are a couple of things. There are a couple of strategies that failed. One was that we tried to automate too much too soon. So there are lots of tools out there that you can use, but you know, you can go to tool mad and have too many apps, and you know, you just lose track of what app is doing what in your with your data. So that was one reason, and we invested a lot of money trying to automate some of those processes, where actually we realized that we could automate it up to about 60%, and the other part had to be done with human beings. So that was one very tough lesson. The other thing is being a little bit too far ahead with your thinking and with your concepts. You know, what we discovered, we were 5 or 6 years ago, we were too far ahead, and people didn't. Only a very small subset of our customers really understood what we were, the value we were bringing to them.
The problem therein is that you're not being paid for your product. You're not being paid to educate the market.
Yeah, we weren't selling, we were educating the marketplace, which is crazy. So don't fall into that trap. Make sure that what you're selling and the product and service you have is easily understandable. And today, those sort of slightly futuristic ideas that we had are absolutely, the timing is perfect for them. People are now getting it.
George, I'm not one for hyperbole, but just to make our students realize how important this point is. tell us, if you don't mind, how much did this mistake cost your company?
About £1 million and two years of effort.
It's a lot.
We learned a lot. You know, don't misunderstand me. We learned a lot, and we were able to learn from that and adjust the business accordingly. But it was painful, yeah.
So Frank, you work in an environment where data is extremely sensitive. It's reputational damage if something breaks out. It's about good governance, and in some of the most trusted institutions in the UK. What do you think can go wrong if you're not treating your data carefully?
Well, you're right to say that you're right. There are great sensitivities around governance, and it is a confidential discussion that takes place between a few people. Those few people are the directors of a company or the trustees of a charity. There may be some members of the senior executive team there, but the types of information that are connected with that governance agenda are highly sensitive, and you would not want to have in the public domain. Or if you do choose to release some of it in the public domain, it would be heavily filtered and censored for presentation. So here's the thing. Now we're born in the cloud business, so we run our services on Amazon Web Services. So one of the things we have to keep in mind is we're trusting a third party with the reputation of our company. Because if there should ever be a data breach, and the data which we hold, although it is encrypted, by the way, importantly to mention that, it is encrypted, that could have a reputational hit on our company. So we trust our third-party provider, Amazon Web Services, who, as a small company, we cannot afford to employ people who are heavyweights in security, data protection, data privacy. We understand the need for it, of course, but we rely on a company that is superb at doing it because they can afford the best brains. And in fact, if we think about our reputation, their reputation is, as a public company and one of the world's largest public companies, many times greater than our reputation in terms of the harm it would cause in the event that something should happen that would affect the data we hold about our customers and their governance, and that should fall in the hands of those that should not see it. So we take it very seriously. So some of the things we've done, so it's one thing to delegate this to a third party, and the third party is Amazon Web Services. You also have to look at your internal controls as well. George has mentioned moving stuff off email, which is a very vulnerable way to communicate and particularly to transmit documents because of the potential of interception and the onward forwarding of those documents to people that maybe shouldn't see it. So we've moved to systems like Box, for example, to manage our data and our collaboration and sharing of data. We are registered with the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, that is in the UK, as a data controller. I personally am trained to be a data protection officer, so I'm learned in the application of GDPR and the Data Protection Act 2018 in the UK. So there's some practical measures you have to take as well to safeguard your own interests, as well as, because we're born in the cloud business, of necessity, we can't afford the infrastructure and necessary software to run our business other than subscribing to it on an as-needed basis with Amazon Web Services. So those are the dimensions which we wrestle with every day to ensure that we can protect our clients' data and therefore protect them from that ever being shared with anyone that should not be privileged to see it, and indeed, therefore, our company's reputation.
So we've talked a lot so far about the role of digital literacy,
yes,
about the importance of data and how we treat that within our organization. We've talked about the practical examples. George, thank you for that, sharing how, from the internal perspective, you do the messaging and you create this ideal customer profile. And then from the external perspective, being able to use data to identify your target market, your service addressable and service obtainable market, and getting hyper targeted to having the right conversations at the right time with the right people. And Frank, I'd like to ask, out of all of the experience that that you've had from your previous companies and what you're doing now, what are some of the things that are going right? What are the strategies that are working for you to grow your digital business?
Yeah, I mean, you need to get some essentials right, Frank. So we just talk about them because it's important, because if these things don't work, it's going to stymie you as a business. So we're currently on a website version 2. We are competent now in our social media activities. We've chosen Twitter and LinkedIn as our primary channels which we communicate with our audiences. So I'm just counting down some things that I think you have to do. If you don't have these basics in place, it's much harder.
Basics.
Yeah. So we've been through an incubator program with Set Squared, one of Europe's largest incubators, to test our business model and our proposition and our readiness for a raise, because at some time we are going to have to make a capital raise. But the other things which we've done, and this is really important. So I came from the IT industry into a new industry, which is serving charity, not-for-profit housing associations. Here was the challenge for me. I wasn't networked in that industry. I had very few connections. So one of the things you need to do, if you're going to switch industry, as I have done, even though I've taken all my digital skills with me from IT into this new occupation and business I have, I failed to recognize that every industry sector has a community, and my community didn't travel very well into this new sector that I was serving. So one of the mistakes I made, if you will, was not understanding that I'd have to build a network again, make new connections, and that takes a lot of time, even with the support of LinkedIn, social media, and sometimes leaning on people to help you make introductions. So relationships came into focus. Then you need to understand who the primary influencers are that are influencing your target customer audiences. So we went and identified that. That took some time. And then breaking into new organizations and finding people that will listen to you and win them over, that takes time as well. Now we know who they are, and we're top to bottom, from government through the Charity Commission, through the various charity membership bodies. We're doing quite well there. The other interesting thing when you start a new business and you're building a digital business, you've got to think about not only about how you will earn money, but how you can create an opportunity for others to earn money. This is a very important thing. So a lot of businesses out there and a lot of individuals who would like to have a digital business, but don't have the cash or wherewithal to do it. And the wherewithal, I'm talking about sometimes the necessary skills to get a digital business off the ground. So we've worked hard to create an opportunity for others to earn money by working with us. So there's just some of the things I mentioned. I can expand on them if you wish.
Yeah, so as a growth strategy, you're working with consultants and partners and sharing a slice of the revenue, or sharing a slice of the customer value. You've got a really valuable product as a software vendor, as someone working within the charity space and within the governance sector, but it's working with others and playing nicely with others that you expand your market reach. Has that been one of the key goals for you over the last 18 months?
Absolutely. It does two things, actually. First of all, I said we're a challenger or a disruptor business. So we are also not just asking the customers to think differently about how they would conduct a governance review, but we're also asking those that have earned money from delivering governance reviews in what I would call a conventional way, the old established way, to think that there is a better and new way using digital tools to do that. So we have to convince them. Otherwise, what's the point in change? Because they have comfortable relationships, they know what they're doing, confident in the delivery of their services in something they've done for all time. So that's the first thing we have to do. We have to take them with us. But then also, if we're going to take them with us, they need to see how they can be more productive and earn more money working with us than carry on working the other way. The third thing I would mention is that, and we found this out by talking to them, is that really they kind of understood that the world was moving away from what I would call paper and pen methods and interview-intensive, labor-intensive approaches to delivering governance reviews to something that was more digitally enabled. They'd worked with SurveyMonkey, but it has many limitations. When they found us and what we could do, they realized that really this was the future. And some were smart enough to say, well, we can stay in the past, but sooner or later we'll become irrelevant.
Final question before I put this to George. Frank, you've got a digital product.
Yes.
That is disrupting the traditional way of managing governance and managing the data behind governance and good decision making at a very high level, right? Trustees and directors and boards.
Yep.
But what happens if your customers are not digitally literate? You're using all of these digital channels. You're a digital business using digital marketing to deliver a digital service. What if your customers' level of digital literacy is not high enough in order to make the right purchasing decisions?
It's a really interesting question, and it's a big problem. Let me tell you why. Because if you look at charities and you look at the trustee boards, the majority of the composition of those boards are male, aged over 60, well-to-do, didn't grow up in the digital era. Yeah. So many of them are uncomfortable around digital and don't understand why the far side chat with a consultant isn't enough anymore. And so that has become very problematic for us. So can we change that? No, we can't, unless we're going to wholesale change all the composition of all the boards of charities, 180,000 in the UK. So what we look for are people who are working in organizations that are undergoing the kind of digital transformation that we've started to speak about, and therefore already tuned in to the fact that the world is changing and it's becoming more digitally enabled, and find the charities that they are part of, and they can help with us spreading that message and introducing the fact there are alternative ways to the ways we've done things in the past. There is also a digital agenda in the charity sector. It's also under pressure to reduce its cost base, be more efficient, more effective. So we address a number of things in these organizations which are there to help us address what is a problem, a low level of digital literacy among our customer base.
And Frank, in our business with marketing automation, we got the opposite problem. So most
elaborate.
Are highly digital literate. Look at the some of the big brands who have fantastic marketing automation expertise. They use a plethora of tools, but they, some of the problems they're facing is that they're using so many tools that managing them and maintaining them is becoming such a big issue that they need something which does all of that for them out of one box rather than out of 20 or 30 boxes. So yeah, that's there are opposite ends of the scale, but the problem's the same. You start using these tools, and then the problem becomes they create silos, which Frank was talking about, and then silos create data swamps. So you need to be able to find some of the companies that are now taking some of these tools and integrating them, putting them into a workflow which breaks down those silos and avoids the data swamp.
So Frank, you're working with George, you're working with digital natives, right? Those that really understand technology, AI, marketing automation, data analytics, and visualization. And Frank, if George is working with digital natives, you're working with digital immigrants. You're working with those that might not necessarily have grown up with the same level of internet access, apps, technology that the younger generation might have. If I think about the range of students that we have, ranging from those that have just finished high school, and our team as well, those in their early 20s, ranging all the way up to students who in their 60s or staff in their late 50s, we have kind of this soft expectation that over time, through studying online with us, you pick up some of the soft digital skills, like video communication, being able to look people clearly into the camera when you can't be face to face, being able to present yourself online, being able to research online and apply critical thinking to what you see online. Just because it happened on Facebook doesn't mean it's true, right? All of these different things, these different lenses through which we view data kind of shape our perspectives, and they shape our reality to a large extent. So Frank, my next question to you is, what else is going right for both of you? I think you've mentioned that working with consultants and partners gives you reach in the market. What else has been working for you? You've done the basic hygiene on social media, but that hasn't been the driving force behind your success over the last couple of years?
The thing that is working right for us, and it is in some ways, it's not a surprise, to be honest with you, as someone who's been in sales and marketing for a long time, is word of mouth. Finding those people who are influential, and you can find them on social media, who have a big following, for example, who are interested in the subject areas that we are addressing, governance, and attaching yourself to them and contributing to, and it's easy to do, you know, it's something you can learn, it's a skill. Social selling, there are books you can learn about social selling in terms of how you use connections that you can find online to amplify your voice. So it does take a lot of research, it does take time, it takes time to cultivate that relationship. For example, one of the things I've just done, I've just commented on Scottish Government issued a consultation with the charity sector in Scotland to ask questions about revision to charity law. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I completed the consultation, and I noted that they pulled out one thing that I had put in the response to their consultation. I tweeted that, and I was amazed at the response I got from that. Now, that was so sort of left field for me, because I wasn't talking about governance. I was talking about charity law and a proposal to change charity law in Scotland. And suddenly I picked up a whole load of new followers, and more importantly, people that I couldn't reach before. So for me, what has worked well is focusing on social media, because it gives us reach. We're a small company. We can do some work with Google Ads, but we don't have a lot of money. We're financially constrained from running big campaigns. So we have to be smart and canny, using our influence through bigger influencers to reach our audience. That thing is starting to work well now.
Influencer marketing, working with partners. That's really good insight. Thank you, Frank. Now, George, as someone who's started, built, and sold a company recently, I think it would be fair to say that you have a good idea of what works and what doesn't work. So here you are on your next venture as CEO of aiAcquire, excuse me. What do you see are some of the core growth strategies, not just in terms of customer acquisition, but in people? As you grow, you'll need not just scalable tools and systems, which depend on people being digitally literate. You'll grow your sales, you'll grow your pipeline, you'll use your hyper-targeting strategy, which I think a lot of us can learn from. But what about the people aspect?
You know, that's really important. You know, data and analytics can only get you so far. If you wind the clock back, you know, people made a lot of decisions based on gut instinct and a feeling, and a lot of mistakes were made. Now we have more data. People are kind of relying on the data to guide them too much. They've almost gone, you know, to the other extreme. And actually, there's a balance. You need good data to support your decisions, but at the end of the day, you've got to rely on your gut instinct, and you need people around you that can absorb the data, listen to the market, listen to other people, to get input, to be able to then say, okay, I've been out there, I've got the data, which helps me. I've tested it with people that I know and people that I don't know. You know, very often you need to test your ideas, you know, outside of your own sphere. But at the end of the day, you've got to make that gut instinct decision. So the kind of balance, I would say, it would be something like 20 to 30% gut instinct and about 60 to 70% data. You know, at the moment, with all the tools and the AI and everything else, people are going nuts and just relying totally on data. That's a mistake. That's dangerous.
That's what leads to a flash crash.
George, that's a really interesting point. And I agree with you. Are we devolving the human intelligence that we've applied before to our decision making to a machine now. So is there still a role for human intelligence combined with machine intelligence, which is what you're talking about, machine learning and artificial intelligence? And what's the correct blend of that? So you optimize your human intelligence and your machine intelligence to make the best informed decisions. I think that's a really interesting debate, particularly with the digital transformation strategies that are being pursued in companies, the increasing reliance on data and the tools to process, analyze, and spit out results. Is there human intelligence that's looking intelligently, curiously, critical thinking being applied to the results that are being spat out from these tools? Because if there isn't, we're delegating.
Well, we'll be in a situation, where people always say, people buy from people. And are we going to get to a point where machines are going to buy from machines?
Well,
that's
a
point well made. So I guess rounding off on that topic, I think it's really important to note that data management, data skills, and digital literacy is really important. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the execution, or the good execution of a strategy that you've decided, which has come from instinct and been informed by data. I think if we ask, well, let me ask you, what do you think, George first, what do you think is more important in strategic thinking and critical thinking? Is it data and data analytics and deriving raw information, or is it instinct? Is it judgment? What's the role of the human aspect in setting the data first? Which comes first for you?
I'm going to answer this in a completely different way. I think adaptability is and agility is absolutely key. You start off, what's the adage? An average strategy well implemented is so much better than a fantastic strategy that's poorly implemented. So you've got to, it's like flying an aircraft. If something unexpected happens, you hit a storm or something, you've got to adjust to that. You've got to change your strategy. You've got to move. You've got to fly around the storm, not through it. So those are the important things: is to have the data, which is giving you advanced warning of potential problems, which you can then avoid.
But earlier, you also mentioned the importance of tenacity and persistence, and these are traits, or these are qualities of the mind and qualities of the human possessed of them. These are qualities and traits of the person, not skills. So it seems like traits and characteristics are as important as skills in technology and skills in data management when it comes to growing a business.
Absolutely. You spend all this time and effort crafting your message, doing this hyper analysis to get to the exact target person, and you a lot of people go in there and they will approach that individual, that organization, and get no response. And they'll try 2 or 3 times and give up. When you've targeted that carefully, you can't give up. You've got to find every possible way to get around to getting that individual, and it may just be timing. Yeah.
How many people fail after
one week you call them, the next week you send them an SMS, then the other time you send them an email, or somebody in your network talks to them on your behalf, and suddenly you're in. But that can take months. But at the end of the day, it's worth it, because you've identified that customer as a company where there's huge growth potential. So all you need to do is, what term we use is land and expand. You just need to land with something and be able to then grow out.
So Frank, again, the question to you, what's more important when it comes to growing your digital business? Is it digital literacy and data management and some of the technology skills that we've been talking about? Or is it instinct, heart, persistence, and the human characteristics?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Frank. You think about, let's think about the way VCs decide to invest in businesses.
Venture capital.
Yeah, venture capital, yeah. You've got to have an idea, something that appeals to them. They can recognize there's an opportunity there. But what do they really buy? They buy the team, don't they? They buy the team, they buy the people. Yeah. Do they believe that people can execute against the idea, the plan that they brought forward that they want investment for? So for me, yes, you have to have data. It's not a baseline. It says, you know, we understand our market, the market size, blah, blah, blah. That'll get endless revision as you go through your business planning and execution. And probably after a year, the original plan will resemble nothing like the plan 1 year forward in time. So it's very much about, do you have an instinct? Do you have a feeling there's an opportunity out there, a problem to be solved, something that maybe is being done, but it could be done in a vastly superior way? I mean, Richard Branson is somebody who has this mentality, doesn't he? He looks at a business, a product, and says, you know, I can do better than that. Yeah. And so he's a challenger. He's a disruptor. So I think you need to be curious. You need to have an instinct, but you need to believe in what you're about to set out to do. Because as George knows, and he's recounted his own case, sometimes you can be too early to market, something you have to take account of. Is the market ready for your idea, your offer, your proposition, your product, your service? If it's not, is it better to wait, let someone else burn their cash and come in later when there's more opportunity, or it's better grounded and your customers are more open to these propositions and ideas? These are things. So to answer your question, you've got to have instinct, you've got to have a great team, and you've got to believe in whatever it is that you are setting out to do. And if you don't have those things, don't do it, but to make sure you have the data behind, but data is not the number one thing.
Said, in God we trust, all others bring data. Well, it would seem that there's a place for heart and human instinct and the entrepreneurial mindset as...
Well, Richard Branson can't read a set of accounts.
There you go. There you go. And
sorry, I may have to take that back. I have read his autobiography.
Have to fact
that's
check
where
that.
I'm quoting from.
But the point behind all of this is that you need both. If you're going to grow your company, if you're going to grow the top line and the bottom line, you've set your objectives, you've got your tools and technology, you've got your data, you've got a great approach, or you've got a good team that balances one another between technology, data, digital literacy, and sales or marketing effectiveness, and also design skills as well. They're all really important to bring together. And the question I have now, we're coming up to 7 o'clock. If I will press on you for 5 more minutes, I wanted to end with a bit of a bang. So the debate I have for you is well, I'll tell you the debate first. Frank, what do you think are the 3 most important skills or qualities for design and marketing professionals to have now in today's workplace and tomorrow's workplace?
Okay, I've got a cheat sheet for this actually. So,
okay,
so let's understand that there are many surveys available. So I'm quoting from a survey, but I'll overlay it with some personal perspective as well. Within this survey, they're saying their top skill, the most desirable skill a marketing person can have today is data analysis.
Yeah? Data analysis and
data analysis, number 1. Number 2.
Write that down. All of our students, you need to be writing this down.
Data analysis, number 1 skill in demand. Yeah, so if that's got to feature on your CV and be prominent in your interview. Next one, marketing automation and software expertise. So thinking about some of the things George has been speaking, have knowledge of some of the top products that are being used in data analysis and market automation. Yeah, I remember a very interesting story. I remember I went to a company called Box. Actually, I went for an interview with them very, very long time ago. And the hiring manager said, you'd be surprised how many people come in here. And when I say to them, do you know anything about Box? They say no. They kind of left very quickly after that. So and the 3rd most in-demand skill is user experience design.
Interesting. So we've got marketing and design skills that are the top employable skills.
Correct.
You're not talking about sales, you're not talking about cloud, you're not talking about finance. So data analytics, marketing automation, and UX and UI design. Those are the three most employable skills. Well, that's good news for our students.
And I'd overlay that in terms of the personal skills the personal attributes you must have: a curious mind, critical thinking, and be very socially aware. I think marketing people have to be very socially aware. What are the agendas that are socially live? For example, I'll just quote a couple: Black Lives Matter, the woke agendas, for example. In my sector, diversity is very important to understand what that agenda is and what it means and its influence and why it's important. So you need to have some personal attributes as well.
That's an excellent answer. Thank you. George, same question to you. What do you feel are the most employable or the most important skill sets for design and marketing professionals? And let me caveat that by saying, would you hire them into your company?
You know, the biggest skill set, everybody in the organization needs to be able to sell. They need to be able to sell themselves.
Number one.
They need to be able to sell their services. So that's a skill that needs to be across the organization. And you can only achieve that with people. In order to be able to sell, you've got to be passionate about what you do. You've got to enjoy what you do. That has to come over to customers. You know, very often my customers say to me, you get more enthusiastic about our products than we do. And I think, my God, that's worrying. So, but the point is made. You've got to be passionate. And then the other thing is, you've got to be confident enough to be able to challenge your customers and say, look, there's a better way of doing this. And I've looked at your business. And by the way, I don't think it's data analytics skills. I think it's understanding how a business operates skills. So a business analytics person who can then look at a company and say, look, you can do things better if you do this, this, and this. And by the way, I have those products and skills for you. Is going to make a big difference to your business. So yeah, if there's one thing I would say to the audience here, be passionate about what you do, be confident, and come over as enthusiastic about what it is that you do. It makes a huge difference to the people you're talking to.
Well, George, CEO of aiAcquire, Frank, the co-CEO of DigiBoard, myself, little old Frank Sullivan, your host and guide on this craziness. I can't thank you enough for volunteering your time today to talk to our students and talk to some of our participants about growing your digital business. We've had a whirlwind tour. We've started with digital literacy and digital skills. We talked about the role of data in the organization and where things can go right and where things can go wrong. We talked about tools fatigue. And we talked about the growth mindset and setting KPIs and the importance of using data and having an evidence-based approach, similar to the lean startup method. And then we've kind of rounded off looking at the traits necessary to be successful in business and the impact that has on the outcomes of the business. And I think we've all safely concluded that it's a combination of having highly employable skills like Frank mentioned, data literacy, data analytics, marketing automation, and UI and UX design. These are really employable skills, but also having heart, also having the ability to sell ourselves, also having the ability to make commercial arguments, critical thinking, having empathy. Not everything can be automated away, having empathy with our customers. And most importantly, if you want to grow, not just the business, but yourselves also, it's like you said, George, you've got to have passion. If you don't believe in what you're doing or what you're selling, how can you ever expect the customer to? And on that note, I bid you all a wonderful evening. If you'd like to learn more, we do have the LSDM Leaders Program podcast, which you can find on our website, which is lsdmlondon.com. For those of you who are joining us LSDM is a digital university offering courses in design and marketing. We're an accredited school by University for the Creative Arts with bachelor's and master's programs in design and marketing. And we have a wonderful range of industry speakers with real practical experience like Frank and like George here. And I would strongly encourage you to go Frank Bennett's new book, Building a Digital Operating Model. Frank, could I ask you to share the link with our students in the chat box here, please? It's free to download, right?
Yes, it is. Frank, it's the website which I operate, which gives a link, because Microsoft.com is an extensive website. You'll spend forever trying to find it. If you go to Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework.com, which is a website I put, Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework.com, hoping I can sell that domain name to Microsoft one day, and who knows. Anyways, you'll find a link in there that will take you directly to deep buried into Microsoft.com's website, where you can download the book. Interestingly enough, Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework.com.
There we go. Okay.
Just check that there. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Now, I don't, you guys have been very, very generous with your time already. I'm going to take a couple of questions from our students and from the audience, if that's okay with you.
Go, yeah, sure thing.
Fine.
Yeah.
Welcome questions.
I know Malachi has asked to be unmuted and see here. So I'm just going to change the permissions here. And all right, everyone should be able to turn their cameras on now. If anyone would like to ask questions, you've got two serial entrepreneurs here who have got some excellent advice for our students, marketing and design side, who really know their things. Take advantage of this whilst you can. You can put them in the chat box if you're a little bit camera shy, or you should be able to unmute.
Many of them are muted, Frank, I can see that. Some are also getting hungry and going to go to dinner.
Yeah, standing in the way.
Hello.
Hello, who is that?
Hello, Frank and all the facilitators. My name is Musa Sinusi Ahmed. I'm calling you from Nigeria. I'm a sport business critic and sport documentarian, and sometimes a fact finder, a multinational business fact finder. I'm very happy hearing from all the facilitators. It was very great because currently during COVID-19, I got the privilege to do some business criticism project, business analysis and critical thinking analysis of sport businesses around the world. And since then, I got the privilege to started a company called Sportigation, where we tend to be providing in-depth analysis, criticism, interpretations, and fact-finding, and sometimes events and documentaries on sport businesses. So when I got the privilege to hear from the facilitators, they encouraged me more that even in these early days, we are unable to make conversions and make some revenue, but we got the privilege.
Musa, I have a question. Do you have a question for our speakers?
Yes, my question is that how best can someone sell his content, the text, the audio content in this era of hyper technological situation? This is my question. Thank you.
How best can you sell and distribute audio content in this era? Would someone like to take that?
Frank, my suggestion: you need to find a platform,
yeah.
But particularly a platform that is attracting the audience that you want to attract for your content. So that's a piece of desktop research. That's where I would start with that. And there are many, as you know, platforms for distribution of podcasts. And I don't know what is relevant in Nigeria, but I would know what's relevant in the UK. And they're multiple. You've got to look at the costs of them. But most importantly, is that platform attracting the audience that you want to address?
So,
the podcasts are all good. The videos are good. There are lots of video platforms where you can, put your content on. But the thing that brings it to life is when people pick up on it, especially people who are influential. So if there was one piece of advice, is make sure that the people who are influential in your area of business are talking about your content, so that the word is spread in the right community.
So Musa, I've got a bit of a unique perspective on this, having been in media and done media distribution deals before. I think you need to understand the three models first for how to monetize your content, especially if it's audio content. The first is through ad revenue. So are you distributing your content globally through a platform like Spotify or Anchor or Apple Podcasts or YouTube, for example, where you are able to monetize the content because others are serving ads and you're getting paid a percentage of the ad share revenue? The second is through subscriptions, or people willing to pay you to hear your content so you have your own niche channel. For example, Substack is really good for promoting certain subscriptions. It's where authors or content creators are able to monetize their audiences. The third way is through licensing. So if you have content that's valuable and publishers are looking for that kind of content, then publishers would license your content and pay you a royalty. And the fourth and only other way that I can think of to monetize and stably grow beyond subscriptions, ad sharing, or licensing deals is through cross sponsorship, where you take a segment of the audio and you're doing native advertising, where a sports brand, you mentioned you're in sports broadcasting and sports commentating. Forgive me if that's wrong, that's what I heard. If you have sports brands that are looking to break into either a national or an international market, then you have certain episodes that are sponsored. But I think the first thing to do is the audio good quality and you've got content that people are willing to pay for. The second is do your online research and find the best place to distribute that content that has monetization built in, but decide which of my 4 monetization models suggestions is right for you. I think that's about as comprehensive as I can get.
So thank you all.
You're welcome, Musa. So the next question here was from Lamise. Would you suggest thinking process? Would you suggest a good process or a good thought experiment for optimizing and analyzing your user experience in B2B? So if you think about what's a good B2B user experience versus what's a good B2C experience, how would we go about how would we think about that? Well, I'm going to take this one first, and I'm going to pass it to Frank because he's got some good insights here. I would say, how well do you understand your user journey map? How well do you understand step by step how your end users or your end customers, end users within your B2B client base, how are they behaving versus how you've designed the process? A good way of understanding the difference between UI and UX design is I want you to think of a path and there's a shortcut, but you have to walk across the grass. A lot of people will walk across the grass, even though it's only an extra 10 seconds to walk along the path. User experience tells us that they're going to walk across the grass. UI design is the path that they've laid out beautifully. There are some graphics that illustrate that. So as a thought process, break it down step by step. What's your user journey map? And what's the outcome? And are there any blockers in that pipeline? That's my suggestion. Frank?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Frank. And it's very complex and it will go through multiple iterations before you get it right. I remember once involving myself with a client and simply changing a button which the customer would press to order from red to green had a transformational effect on sales. It may seem small and insignificant, but it did. I think one of the things you need to understand about your customer journey is how do they specify and buy products today? Are you inviting them into a process which they are unfamiliar with to specify and buy their products? or if it is unfamiliar to them, how do you guide them successfully through that process? We've all been on websites where we've been intent on buying something, but abandoned and moved on because we haven't been able to quickly enough and efficiently enough execute what our purpose of being there, which is to buy something. So understand how they specify and buy products today, and that is key information to have.
Yeah. And second question from Lamise. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm going to throw this one to George. George, Lamise's question is, are there, as someone who runs a marketing automation company, I'm going to ask you to be vendor neutral here. So are there any specific tools that you could recommend for marketing automation?
Yes, the one we represent.
Buy George's product.
Yeah, but I just want to jump back to what Frank was saying as well. I worked for a company called Intergraph, who were a leader in this, one of the leaders in the CAD/CAM business 10, 15 years ago. And one of the things that they kept on doing was making products which they thought customers would like, and got all enthusiastic, and then got completely disheartened when they took them to customers. They said, no, we don't work that way. It needs to work this way. So they had to go all the way back to the drawing board. So point I'm making here is talk to your customers.
Pick up the phone.
Show them prototypes. Don't show them the finished product. Show them prototypes and show them some ideas, and find out whether you're on the right track or not. And then when you've done enough of that kind of testing of the concept, then bake the product and then get it out there. And I tell you something, your customers will be your salespeople.
Word of mouth. There you go. One happy customer can refer you 3 new customers. An unhappy customer can lose you 5 customers.
Exactly.
Unfair mathematics. All right. Any final questions before I release our speakers? You've been extremely generous with your time. Thank you, George. Thank you, Frank.
No problem. I just would a message to your students, Frank, really, in terms of everyone's looking for work, maybe, or if they're not looking for work and a better job, then they may be looking to start their own business. I think the CPD, the continuing professional development that they're doing, is so vital. One of the conversations I have with people is, whose responsibility is it for digital literacy in organizations? Is it your employers? Is it you as the employee, or is it a blend of both? Why take the chance? Do it yourself.
From my side, I think CPD is important, but the #1 quality that I would look for when I'm hiring is ability to learn. Have they learned how to learn? And do they have an open mind and an open attitude? But characteristics that are innate, like empathy, having good ethics and being truthful and having a hardworking attitude, these are things that you either have or you don't. If you can learn, I can teach you a skill. That's always been my philosophy. And Frank, you're absolutely right on that point.
Frank, a lot of people are asking if they can have access to the webinar recording. There's a lot of messages coming up.
For only one low payment of $9.99, click here to subscribe. Yes, I will. I promise I will send the recording around to those who have participated and those who came a little bit late. On that note, thank you very much. I hope you found this useful. I've learned something as well. Wonderful evening. George, Frank, thank you very much.
Yeah. Good luck, everybody. And go out there and get passionate about what you do.
Good words to end on. Thank you, George.
Right. Bye-bye.